I want you to just take a second and imagine a bank robbery,
Oh, boy. Okay.
but, completely wipe away that standard Hollywood image of a heist. So there are no ski masks, nobody is kicking down the front doors, and no one is waving a weapon around yelling for everyone to get down on the floor.
Right. None of the obvious stuff.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Instead, picture this. The thief is wearing the exact same uniform as the bank tellers. They actually use a legitimate company-issued key card to walk right through the front door at like 8:55 in the morning.
Wow.
Yeah, and they clock in, they grab a coffee, and they just quietly work a totally normal shift. They seamlessly blend in with the staff, but, they're slipping a few $100s into their pocket every couple of hours.
That is terrifying.
Right. So the question is, how on earth do you catch an attacker who looks perfectly flawlessly normal?
I mean, it really is the ultimate security nightmare because, your perimeter fences, they're designed to look for anomalies. They look for violence, basically, for the obvious brute force break-in. But when the threat is already inside and they're using your own systems and your own credentials against you, well, those traditional perimeter arms are entirely useless at that point.
And that exact scenario is really the core of our deep dive today. We're exploring the underlying concepts and, the real theory of modern cybersecurity defense.
Yeah, because we have to.
We do. We're moving way beyond this legacy idea of just installing some signature-based antivirus and hoping for the best.
Thank goodness.
So true. We're going to look at how defenders sift through literal mountains of digital noise to find that ghost in the machine, as they say. We are pulling from a really comprehensive technical guide today on things like endpoint detection and response, security information and event management, and indicators of compromise.
Which are huge topics, but so fundamental.
Exactly. We'll start by unpacking the behavioral analysis happening on a single isolated computer, and then we're going to zoom all the way out to see how data is correlated across massive global networks to spot that invisible thief. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, let's start right at the micro level, analyzing the individual endpoint.
Okay.
For a really long time, the industry was entirely focused on signature matching.
Right.
Basically, a vendor captures a malicious payload, they generate its unique cryptographic hash, and then they push that signature out to every endpoint agent.
Sort of like a digital wanted poster.
Exactly like a wanted poster. And if a file lands on a disk and matches that signature, boom, it gets quarantined.
Which, that works fine for commoditized recycled malware, right? The
Yeah.
stuff we've seen a million times.
Sure, yeah.
But the glaring vulnerability there is the zero-day attack or polymorphic malware. Because if an adversary custom compiles a payload for a specific target, well, there is no signature on file.
None at all.
The malicious binary just walks right past the guards because its hash has never actually been cataloged.
And that failure of static analysis is really what drove the shift toward endpoint detection and response, or EDR.
Right.
Modern EDR doesn't just evaluate what a binary is, it evaluates what a binary does.
That's a huge distinction.
It really is. It focuses heavily on behavioral analysis and anomaly detection by hooking into the operating system at a very low level. So it's constantly observing process executions, registry modifications, network connections, all in real time.
So let's look at a specific example from the source material. The classic parent-child process anomaly.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. So an EDR agent is monitoring a workstation, and it observes WinWord.x, Microsoft Word, suddenly spawning a child process of PowerShell.x.
Right.
Now, PowerShell itself is a native, legitimate administrative tool built right into Windows. And Microsoft Word is obviously a trusted application.
Yeah, totally trust it.
So a static analysis tool just sees two safe executables and completely ignores them.
But what's fascinating here is how behavioral analysis catches the context. A word processor silently invoking a powerful system-level command line interface. That is a highly suspicious relationship.
Yeah, a user typing up a quarterly report does not need to execute encoded shell scripts.
Exactly. EDR identifies that sequence as anomalous behavior, regardless of the fact that the binaries themselves are cryptographically trusted.
So it's essentially acting as a digital body language expert.
Oh, I like that, yeah.
It's evaluating the telemetry. And the engine powering that observation is relying heavily on machine learning models, right?
Very heavily, yes. Because adversaries are constantly shifting toward what we call fileless attacks.
Right, living off the land.
Exactly. They abuse built-in tools like WMI or PowerShell, so they don't even have to drop compiled malware onto the disk at all. And because there isn't a traditional file to scan, those machine learning models are trained on vast data sets of typical administrative behavior versus adversarial tradecraft.
So it's looking for patterns.
Right. The model evaluates a multi-stage execution chain.
Yeah.
Like, it might determine that querying the Active Directory isn't inherently bad on its own,
Sure.
and creating a scheduled task isn't inherently bad, but querying the directory, followed immediately by creating a hidden scheduled task, and then initiating an outbound connection over some obscure port.
That's a red flag.
A massive one. The ML model recognizes that specific chain of events as malicious.
And then it categorizes that behavior against established frameworks, right? Like the MIARE, AT&CNT matrix.
Yes, exactly.
So when that scheduled task is created, the EDR tags the alert with the tactic of persistence. It contextualizes the telemetry, telling the security analyst not just what process executed, but why the adversary executed it.
Right. They are trying to establish a foothold that actually survives a system reboot.
But this raises a huge operational question for me.
Okay, what's that?
If the EDR's machine learning model detects this highly suspicious digital body language, does it just automatically pull the plug?
Yeah.
I mean, do we really want algorithms automatically isolating machines the second some threshold is crossed?
That is the big question. Automated response is absolutely a double-edged sword. I mean, you can certainly configure a policy for immediate host isolation. If a laptop in, say, a low-tier department starts exhibiting ransomware-like encryption behaviors, isolating it from the network instantly prevents lateral movement. It contains the blast radius.
Which is great.
It is,
Yeah.
but you have to weigh that against business continuity.
Right, because if the server exhibiting anomalous behavior is the core database processing millions of dollars in transactions, a false positive isolation is catastrophic.
Oh, it's a nightmare.
You essentially end up executing a self-inflicted denial of service attack. You're doing the adversary's job for them.
Which is exactly why robust EDR provides surgical response options. Instead of just dropping the network interface on an entire server, an analyst can terminate the specific offending process tree.
Just kill the bad part.
Right. Or they can leverage real-time response, RTR.
Mm-hmm.
This allows the Security Operations Center to drop into a secure remote shell on the endpoint, and it's completely transparent to the end user.
And from that remote shell, the analyst can acquire volatile forensic artifacts without ever touching the physical hardware. They can pull a full memory dump to analyze what's running in RAM, extract the Windows event logs, or pull the registry highs to identify exactly how the adversary modified the system configuration.
Yeah, EDR is phenomenal for that deep surgical visibility on a single host. But, and this is a big but attackers rarely stay on that initial point of compromise.
Right, they want to spread.
Yeah, they harvest credentials and they move laterally.
And that leads us perfectly into the macro level. Defending a single laptop is one thing, but think about a real enterprise environment. It might consist of hundreds of Windows workstations, a fleet of Linux servers, cloud infrastructure, and all the network hardware routing the traffic between them.
It's a lot.
It introduces this massive data problem that the text calls logs everywhere.
Right, logs everywhere, because every single device on a network generates telemetry.
Yeah.
Host-centric logs, record user authentication, file access, process execution.
And then there are the network-centric logs, right?
Exactly, capturing DNS queries, firewall allows and denies, VPN session data. It is a fire hose of information.
But natively, there's zero centralization. The logs just reside locally on the appliances that generate them.
Yeah.
So if you're investigating a lateral movement campaign, you'd theoretically have to SSH into a dozen different Linux servers, pull the Apache logs, jump over to a Windows domain controller to query Event Viewer, and then log into a Cisco router to pull flow data.
Which would take days.
And none of these systems format the logs the same way. The timestamps are different, the field names are different. It's just a completely decentralized mess.
And analyzing that volume of unstructured distributed data in real time, it is computationally and humanly impossible.
Yeah, no way.
So the architectural solution to this is a Security Information and Event Management System. A SIEM.
Ah, okay.
The SIEM basically acts as the centralized nervous system for the enterprise. It ingests all of that raw telemetry and performs two critical things, normalization and correlation.
So normalization addresses the language barrier. The SIEM parses the unstructured syslogs from the firewalls and the XML data from the Windows hosts, and it maps all those disparate field names into one common schema.
Right.
So whether the original log called it source_IP or just SRC or client address, the SIEM normalizes it into a single standardized field.
Which is huge.
Yeah, and once the data is structured and centrally searchable, then the correlation engine takes over.
And correlation is where the actual threat hunting happens. It's the process of linking seemingly disparate events across different log sources to identify a broader attack narrative.
The analogy that comes to mind here is like a detective piecing together a timeline,
Oh, yeah.
right? So they get a citation report from a traffic cop about a speeding vehicle. Then they get a totally separate noise complaint about power tools running late at night next to a bank.
Okay.
And then they get a third report of a bypassed alarm system.
Right.
In a vacuum, a speeding ticket or a noise complaint doesn't trigger a massive police response. But when a centralized desk correlates those three events across a shared timeline and geographic location, the pattern points clearly to a coordinated bank heist.
That is a perfect analogy. So let's apply that mechanism to a network intrusion scenario from the text.
Okay.
We can look at a sequence involving compromised credentials.
Okay. The Harris scenario.
Yeah. So the SIEM ingests a log showing a user, let's call him Harris, authenticating via the VPN.
And by itself, an employee logging into the VPN is standard operating procedure. Nothing weird there.
Right. But the SIEM notes the IP address belongs to a network in a country where the company has no actual operations. Then a minute later, a Windows file server generates an event log showing Harris's account accessing a sensitive, restricted directory.
But again, he has the access rights. The file server alone doesn't see an anomaly. It just sees an authorized user.
Exactly. But then, shortly after that, an EDR log indicates that the endpoint Harris is utilizing just executed a PowerShell script invoking compression commands.
Okay, now it's getting suspicious.
And finally, the perimeter firewall logs a massive outbound data transfer to an unknown external IP over port 443.
See, none of those individual appliances, the VPN gateway, the file server, the EDR, or the firewall, none of them have the context to declare an emergency on their own.
None of them.
But the SIEM's correlation engine uses time bounding and logic gates to evaluate the whole sequence.
Yes.
It sees a geographically anomalous login, followed by sensitive file access, automated compression, and bulk data exfiltration.
Yeah.
And all of this is occurring within a 10-minute sliding window.
Right. The engine assigns a risk score to that specific chain of events, it crosses an alert threshold, and it fires a high-severity incident right to the dashboard.
But I'm guessing the efficacy of the SIEM is entirely dependent on the quality of the correlation rules written by the analysts, right?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. The analysts have to use Boolean logic and regular expressions to hunt for specific operational tradecraft.
Right. Take log evasion, for example. Adversaries frequently attempt to clear their tracks during the post-exploitation phase by, deleting the system logs.
Classic move.
And in a Windows environment, clearing the event log generates a very specific alert, event ID 104.
Right.
So an analyst configures a correlation rule that basically says, if the log source is Windows and the event ID is 104, escalate immediately.
Exactly. Or they compound the logic to detect reconnaissance. Like if the SIEM sees event code 4688, which indicates a new process has been created and the command line arguments contain something like WAMI or netgroup domain admins, it triggers an alert.
Got it.
The system is continuously evaluating millions of normalized logs against these logical expressions every single second.
Okay, so the SIEM does its job. It correlates the telemetry, fires an alert, and an analyst begins triaging the incident.
Right.
At this stage, they need to extract indicators of compromise, or IOCs, to scope the intrusion and implement blocks. But relying on indicators brings us to this really fascinating theoretical framework from the source known as the Pyramid of Pain.
I love the Pyramid of Pain. It is a brilliant conceptual model. It categorizes different types of IOCs based on how much friction or, pain it causes an adversary when a defender blocks that specific indicator.
Makes sense.
So at the base of the pyramid, representing the lowest level of friction for the attacker, are cryptographic hashes.
Right. We rely heavily on hashes like SHA-256 to uniquely identify known malicious payloads. If a piece of malware is analyzed, its SHA-256 hash is distributed via threat intelligence feeds, and security controls will basically outright drop any file matching that exact string.
And look, it's an essential baseline defense.
Yeah.
But mathematically, hashes are incredibly fragile. Because of the avalanche effect in cryptographic algorithms, changing even a single bit of the input data completely alters the resulting hash.
This is where it gets really interesting to me. If a hash is basically a digital fingerprint, can't the attacker just, wear gloves?
Pretty much.
The source mentions that if an adversary realizes their malware payload is being blocked by a hash-based control, they don't have to redesign their software architecture.
No, not at all.
They can simply open a command prompt, and use a basic echo command to append a single byte of random data, like a null character or a tiny string of text, right to the end of the binary.
Yeah.
The malicious code functions exactly the same, but that microscopic change to the file alters the entire SHA-256 output.
The old signature is instantly obsolete.
And the modified payload slips right past the perimeter,
Mm.
and it costs the adversary, what, seconds of effort?
Literally seconds, which is why moving up a tier on the pyramid brings us to IP addresses.
Okay.
If defenders can't rely on the file hash, they pivot to blocking the network infrastructure itself.
Right.
They identify the external IP address the malware is communicating with for command and control, and they sinkhole that traffic at the firewall.
Which definitely feels proactive. You're cutting off the adversary's communication channel.
Yeah, but sophisticated threat actors anticipate this.
Of course they do.
So they employ a DNS manipulation technique called fast flux.
Fast flux.
Yeah. They recognize that hard coding a single IP address is a huge single point of failure. So instead, they compromise hundreds or even thousands of vulnerable IoT devices or residential routers globally to build a botnet.
Oh, wow.
And they use these compromised hosts as reverse proxies.
And the mechanism making that actually work is the manipulation of the DNS time to live, or TTL, values.
Exactly.
The adversary registers a domain name, but configures the DNS records with an extremely short TTL, sometimes just a few minutes, right?
Yes. So when the malware reaches out to the command and control server, DNS resolves the connection to, say, proxy A in Germany.
Okay.
But 5 minutes later, the TTL expires, the DNS record updates, and the next connection resolves to proxy B in Brazil.
Unbelievable.
The IP address associated with the malicious infrastructure is in a constant state of rotation, so the defender blocks one IP and the adversary just seamlessly pivots to another within the botnet swarm.
It's literally a game of whack-a-mole.
It really is. It's slightly more annoying for the attacker than changing a file hash, but with automation, it is a pretty trivial hurdle to clear.
So to counter fast flux, defenders have to escalate further up the pyramid, right? Targeting domain names.
Yes.
Instead of playing whack-a-mole with rotating IP addresses, they block the actual domain, let's say evilcorp.com, right at the DNS sinkhole.
Right?
And because acquiring new domains requires registering them, setting up the authoritative name servers, and aging them so they don't look brand new, this finally starts to introduce tangible operational costs for the adversary.
Right. It forces them to burn infrastructure.
Yes.
But adversaries adapt to this too by leveraging obfuscation and deception, particularly through homoglyph attacks using punny code.
The mechanics of pony code attacks are just mind-bending.
They are so clever.
It exploits the internationalized domain name system. User might receive a phishing link pointing to what visually appears to be the legitimate domain for Adidas, the shoe company.
Right.
In their browser's address bar, the letters look exactly like adidas.d.
But the rendering is a total illusion.
Right.
Ponycode is designed to convert Unicode characters, like those from the Cyrillic or Greek alphabets, into the restricted ASCII character set required by the DNS system.
Right. So the adversary registers a domain where the letter A or I is actually a visually identical character from the Cyrillic alphabet.
Exactly.
To the human eye, the font renders perfectly as adidas.d. But beneath the hood, the browser translates that Cyrillic character into its Ponycode ASCII equivalent, which looks like a string of random characters starting with X and dash dash.
Yeah.
The user inherently trusts the visual display, they click the link, and their traffic is routed to the adversary's infrastructure instead of the legitimate corporate site.
Now, browser vendors are continuously updating their security indicators to flag irregular Unicode characters and expose the underlying Ponycode,
Right.
but
It's an ongoing battle.
it is. The tactic demonstrates how adversaries just continuously evolve to bypass rigid defensive indicators.
Right.
And when domain spoofing fails, they often just pivot to URL shorteners.
Ah, right. Routing malicious payloads through services like Bitly or TinyURL.
Exactly. It masks the true destination domain entirely. The payload link appears completely benign, which easily bypasses basic email filtering rules. But a useful operational, sort of theoretical defense tip for anyone investigating these shortened links is simply appending a plus sign to the end of the URL.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Pasting the bit.ly link into a browser and adding a plus sign will often intercept the redirect, and it'll display the destination analytics page, revealing the true underlying domain before any connection is actually established.
That is such a great practical takeaway.
It's super handy.
So if we synthesize everything we've covered today,
Yeah, let's zoom out.
the sheer complexity of modern enterprise defense becomes incredibly apparent. We zoomed into the micro level, looking at how EDR utilizes machine learning and API hooking to observe the behavioral body language of process execution, mapping those anomalies to frameworks like MITRE, ATT, and CK. Then we scaled out to the macro level, examining how a SUMP architecture solves that decentralized data problem by normalizing varied log formats and utilizing logic-based correlation to detect the subtle, breadcrumbs of lateral movement.
Right.
And finally, we climbed the pyramid of pain, unpacking the mathematical fragility of cryptographic hashes and the crazy DNS manipulation mechanisms of fast flux and Honeycode.
And really, the overarching theme here is that the perimeter is dead.
Yeah.
You just cannot build a wall high enough to keep advanced adversaries out because they are leveraging the very tools and protocols your business requires to operate.
That's the scariest part.
It is. So for you listening, remember that every time you establish a work VPN session, every time you execute a PowerShell command for system administration, or even every time you just resolve a DNS query or click a shortened link, you are participating in a continuous high-stakes game of digital chess. Your actions are generating the telemetry that defensive machine learning models rely on to validate that you are, in fact, authorized to be there.
Which leads us to a fascinating, albeit deeply unsettling, final thought for you to chew on.
Oh, I'm ready.
We've established that defenders are heavily reliant on machine learning to establish a baseline of normal behavior for every user and every endpoint.
Right.
The EDR knows what time you log in, what directories you frequently access, and what applications you typically spawn.
It knows your habits.
Yeah, it uses that baseline to detect the anomalies when an adversary compromises your account. But the democratization of artificial intelligence goes both ways.
Oh, no.
Right. How long will it be until advanced persistent threats deploy their own machine learning models during the reconnaissance phase?
Wow.
Models specifically designed to sit silently on a compromised endpoint, just observing and training on your specific typing cadence, your workflow habits, and your daily schedule.
That is entirely plausible.
Once the offensive model perfectly understands your baseline, it can automate the exfiltration and lateral movement to seamlessly mimic your exact behavioral fingerprint.
Terrifying.
When the adversary's automation knows how to wear your digital uniform flawlessly, how will the defensive correlation engine ever know it isn't you?